I'm Karen Curry Parker. I'm excited to be chatting with you today here in the Quantum Human Design Facebook group. So I have a couple of things I just want to share with you before we get started talking today about sort of the continuation of what I started talking about yesterday. So yesterday I gave you a really nice introduction to quantum human design. Today I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways in which I teach human design that are different from traditional human design, and how you can play with these expanded definitions of the parts of the chart in a way that helps you gain more influence over your life experiences and helps support you in really manifesting, consciously working with the energy of your chart to create what you want in your life, which is really, to me, the whole goal of working with your human design. It helps you create for yourself a much more aligned, joyful, and juicy life. So I want to start, before we go too far down the rabbit hole and I forget to do all the things I'm supposed to do, because I have a list of things I got told that I have to say today. The first thing that I want to just remind you of is that starting on Monday, we have a 7-day challenge happening here in this Facebook group. So we're going to be talking about, starting on Monday, for about 30 to 45 minutes a day for 7 days, we're going to be talking about self-love and why self-love is so essential to helping you create what you want in your life. We're going to be looking at self-love through the lens of quantum human design, and we're going to be exploring bits and pieces and parts of your personal chart to help you maximize your path to falling madly in love with yourself. When we look at the chart and we look at the center of the chart, the diamond in the middle, the G center, what we see is that the center for love and direction, the G center, takes its direction from the energy of love, the quality of love that you have for yourself. So the very first thing we have to look at, if we want to create a life that we love, create a life that is juicy and joyful and really, harmonious with the true story of who we are, we have to start first with self-love. So that challenge starts on Monday. If you want to sign up for the challenge, if you go on this Facebook page, you'll find the sign up. You can get in there. If you sign up, you'll get access to the workbook. You'll get access to the replays. You'll be able to log in and stay current with the challenge, which will be posted over the course of 7 days, and then the replays will be up for a couple of days after that, and then it all goes away. So I'm putting a little bit of pressure on you, if you will, not because I want to be mean, but because I know that sometimes, especially when we come up against things that make us feel vulnerable or things that cause us to have to sort of drop into hard truths, especially when it comes to self-love, we avoid it, right? We stop doing it, or we don't look at it, or we put it off until later. And the truth is, you won't get there until you do the work. There is no hack for self-love. I'm not going to say it has to be long and hard and horrible, but it does require attention, and it does require awareness, and it does require intention. And so I want to make sure that I'm giving you a good catalyst, if you will, to getting you started. I also have some really, really cool special surprises for you next week that involves me interviewing some of the top leaders in human design. So I'm not going to tell you who it is, but you're going to know who these people are. So I'm going to be actually interviewing live here in this Facebook group some of the top leaders in the human design world, leaders who have written best-selling books, leaders who were the first people to really begin to expand and explore human design in the world. So that's my surprise for next week. So stay here. We got some really good, juicy stuff planned for you. We created this group for you. And actually, I'll say Marla, oh God, Jamie, what's her last name? It totally slipped my brain. Tammy Mack and Marla, these two amazing women actually started this group, and they are working very hard. Sorry, Marla Mack. So it's, yes, Marla Mack. Okay, so forgive me. Anyway, Jamie's going to post the Mac Attack. So that's Marla Mack and Tammy Mack. See, that's why I was having problems, because I was like, they can't have the same last name, but they do. Anyway, both of these beautiful people started this group with the intention of creating a resource center for you. So I do want to just give them a shout out. These are powerful quantum human design specialists. These are people who have done an extensive amount of training, who come here to help you and serve you. So fill out the form, sign up. All right, here we go. Today's little mini lesson. So yesterday I talked about the difference between traditional human design and quantum human design. And I talked about why I felt compelled to continue to evolve the language in human design to make it more positive, more aligned, more expansive. And so today I want to talk about some of the different ways that I interpret a chart. So you might have heard, if you're familiar with traditional human design, the term conditioning. And you might have heard it even talked about in the context of the not self, which I talked a little bit about yesterday. So if you haven't seen yesterday's video, go back and watch that one too. But one of the things that traditional human design teaches is that we are conditioned, meaning we go out into the world and we have experiences, and those experiences cause us to disconnect from our authentic identity. They cause us to disconnect from who we are and even from how we are designed to show up for life. And if you've ever watched my TED Talk, you'll know that I did a TED Talk last year about trauma and how when we lose connection with our right place in the world and we lose connection with our value in the world, which happens when we lose connection with our right place in the world, that we actually experience that as a trauma. And if we have that experience enough over time, I call these micro traumas, Gabor Mate calls these micro traumas. If we have these kinds of experiences enough times in our life, it actually conditions us to away from ourselves, right? And the body actually starts to react literally as if it is traumatized. And experiences like having a job you hate starts to literally feel like trauma, and the body starts to react to it like trauma, and ultimately it can cause us to burn out. The reason why I resist some of the limiting conversations about traditional human design is because I feel like the explanation of conditioning isn't big enough, that it doesn't cover the bigger picture about how we're conditioned, because we're not simply energetically conditioned as traditional human design might suggest. So traditional human design says where you have openness in your chart, anything that's white in your chart, is where you take energy and information in. And when you take that energy and information in, you amplify it. This is how you know others. And it's in that experience of the amplification that you mistakenly begin to identify with it. That is the definition, basically, of the not self. We think we are our openness instead of realizing that we are actually our definition. So definition is the stuff that's colored in on the chart. Your definition is energy that is fixed and consistent. The way I like to describe it is that your definition is really what you're here to learn from others. Your definition is like having a big basket, and every time you go out into the world and you encounter the archetypes in your chart that are open through your experience with others, it's like you get a little gem and you put it in the basket, and you keep putting those little gems in the basket, and eventually as you mature, you start to realize that these particular archetypes can function in lots of different ways. You've gathered this whole basket of gems of how you know these different archetypes, and from that understanding you actually have freedom or choice to express those archetypes however you choose. So openness actually gives us a lot of freedom to explore the different ways that we can be experiencing the energies we have open or undefined in our chart. Definition is part of your soul curriculum. Everything that's colored in your chart is part of what you're here to learn, and it is to a certain degree internally sourced. It's what you keep coming up against in your maturing journeys and cycles as part of your life. These are the themes you're always going to be exploring over the course of your entire lifetime. These are the places where once you experience these themes, you hopefully become mature and masterful and increase the higher expression of these energies, and ultimately they're part of what you're here to give back to the world through your definition. We have a tendency in the way in which we talk about the chart to say things like, oh, I don't have that in my chart, or I don't have this gate in my chart, or I don't have this in my chart. And the reality is you have all of the chart. We have all of the chart. Just like you have the entire human genome in your cells, you have all of the chart in that genetic expression of the human story that you carry in your cells. Not all of those genes are turned on, right? So you carry them, but they're not all turned on. Your human design is just like that. You have all of it. Not all of it is activated in the same way. Your openness is receptive. It's variable. It has a lot of malleability with it. And ultimately, when you understand it, you have a lot of choice with your openness. Your definition is fixed and consistent. You still grow, you still learn, you still expand upon it. But it's a theme that you're always going to be dealing with. You're always going to be exploring. It's part of your soul curriculum, and it's always a part of you. And the way you experience it is going to be your way, and it's somewhat internally sourced, but you have all of it. And so it's really important when we look at conditioning to start looking at, first of all, there is no not self. It's all you. Openness and definition. It's all you. Secondly, our conditioning doesn't just come from our openness. You can actually have things that are defined in your chart where you've been conditioned away from them. So let's say you have a defined will center. And all of your life, your parents said, oh my God, you're so stubborn. And you internalize that as a bad thing, right? And now you're not able to draw on the healthy use of your will because you're afraid that if you do, people will perceive you as stubborn. Or let's say you have a will center to the throat definition. And so you talk about yourself because you're supposed to. That's your design. You are the resource you're here to give the world. And you do that and people tell you, oh my God, you're so in your ego. All you do is talk about yourself. And that's something you internalize. That's conditioning. When you stop being aligned with that gift that is you, that you're here to give the world, that's conditioning. So you can be conditioned in your openness and you can be conditioned in your definition. So we have to really not define it strictly as openness. There's much, much more to the conditioning process, including if we look at the science of it. We are conditioned by the protein coat regulators on our DNA, the epigenes, that can actually carry up to 14 generations of ancestral memories. That is actually held in the design crystal, which is part of your human design chart. That's actually the red parts of your chart are the codes for your body, your genetics, your life story, and your ancestral lineage is contained in that. And that carries with it up to 14 generations of ancestral memories. You bring that to the table when we live out our conditioning. I personally believe that a lot of us are here right now to help clear that, because we're bringing in all this old conditioning that it's time for us to, as human beings, release and let go of as part of our human story. You can be conditioned by your parents and anybody else you grew up with. You are imprinted. And so what that means is that you can have a parent who is a different type than you. Like, let's say you have a projector parent and you're a manifesting generator child. You might be engaging with the world as if you are a projector because that's what you saw in your family. That's conditioning. Okay? That's different conditioning than your openness. That's you being conditioned by somebody's behavior, which is biologically how it works. We learn from watching our parents, and we can't discount that as part of our conditioning. We are even conditioned by intergenerational family patterns. When we look at human design, you inherit part of your design from your grandparents. Your children inherit part of their design from your parents, and so on and so forth. So there's built into the dynamics intergenerational energy themes that we have a tendency to live out over and over again until we resolve and heal them, and consequently, hopefully, heal in all directions of time through all generations of our lineage. There are lots of different ways that we get conditioned. And if we strictly limit our conditioning to our openness, and we say, these are parts of you that are not you, and you have to just basically ignore these parts because they're not you, and then push against them, right? So, trust your, conditioning in the way we describe it in traditional human design is not big enough. And because it's not big enough, because that expansion and that definition isn't big enough, it doesn't give us enough strategy really to tackle it beyond just following your type and strategy. That's a great way to start, but you can follow your type and strategy for 7 years if you haven't done the internal work. If you haven't done some of the internal explorations, you're not going to get to the clearing that you can do with more. Not going to get to the clearing of the ancestral karma. You're not going to get to the clearing of the traumas where people told you it was not okay for you to be who you are and how you are. You're not going to get to the intergenerational family patterns. There's more than just follow your type and strategy that is an essential part of the deconditioning process. It's not always hard, but you can't ignore it. Sometimes it's just a little shift in perspective, but you can't ignore it. All right, that's it, you guys. Take good care of yourself. Tomorrow, I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about the root center and how to start interpreting the codes, if you will, the codes for the gates in the chart and what those gates actually tell you about how you can bring out the highest expression of the potential of your chart. So I'll see you tomorrow.